morning, lovely people. I wanted to take some time today to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is classical education. So recently I was hired to teach humanities part-time at a classical academy. I'm going to be doing this while doing my master's at the University of Edinburgh. For my daily routine, I'll be teaching in the mornings at this academy, and then I'll come home and I'll work on my master's in the afternoon. I'm just beyond excited for this whole journey. I first discovered classical education while I was in university 3 to 4 years ago, and ever since I've just been so intrigued by this model of education. If you don't know what classical education is, essentially, it is the type of education that dominated the Western world for 1,000 years, up until the 20th century. It draws on the Greek and Roman models of education. It was used during the Middle Ages. Some of history's greatest geniuses, including the American founding fathers, were educated classically. Now, classical education is notoriously hard to define because it is so many things at once. They say that it takes up to 5 years of teaching classically, almost living classically, to fully understand and fully value the depth of this kind of education. The academy that I will be teaching at is Christian, so the kind of education that I will be tackling will be classical Christian education specifically. I will be teaching grades 7 and 8, which is a tricky age. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but I'm excited for the challenge. I know that kids that age ask questions, they're argumentative, and so I'm looking forward to some pushback, hopefully some good discussion and debate with my students. In this video, I am going to attempt to define classical education for you if you've never heard of it, and kind of convince you of the value of this type of education versus kind of the progressive education models that are dominant in the United States and Canada and a large part of the Western world. There is an educational revival happening. Classical schools are popping up all across Canada, all across the United States, because the progressive model is not working. It's not educating our youth as well as it could. It's leaving students with huge gaps in their historical knowledge and thus in their understanding of who they are, where they are, how they fit into the story of the world. And so reviving the classical education model is a way to counter that and to produce literate, intelligent, capable generations that are able to think for themselves and most importantly have mastered the tools of learning so that they can tackle any subject area with ease. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on classical education or that I figured everything out. I'm just learning. I'm actually taking courses online through a sort of online university for classical educators that's really helping me understand this model and helping me prepare to teach students classically. Dorothy Sayers, who was a colleague of C.S. Lewis, said that the goal of education is for the student to learn to teach himself. And that is a huge component of classical education. It's giving students the tools to learn well. It's not just giving them a whole plethora of information about one specific subject and saying, here, memorize this, deal with it. It's teaching them how to learn that material well and to retain it and to think about it critically. Classical education teaches children in the way that they naturally want to be taught. So, for example, when they are astonished by the human tongue, we teach them language and grammar. So in grades K to 6, this is called the grammar stage. That's when children are able to just soak in facts and they're fascinated by the way that language works and grammar works. And so language and grammar are the emphasis during that stage. When students are ready to challenge every assumption, we teach them logic. This is around grades 6 to 9, where students are really learning to think for themselves and they want to argue, and so you teach them how to argue well, persuasively. And then finally, when they are yearning to express themselves with passion, we teach them rhetoric. We teach them how to communicate and express themselves eloquently. This is grades 10 to 12. Another way of explaining it is that from K to 6, the grammar school, they focus on the rudiments of each subject. In middle school, from 7 to 9, they focus on the ordering of subjects. In high school, grades 10 to 12, they focus on the expression of subjects. And so classical education is centered around these stages of the mind. Now, all the while, students are learning subjects, specifically the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. So students are learning mathematics, as well as reading great literature. A huge element of classical education is focus on the great books, specifically the great books in the Western canon, the classics. Students also learn Latin from an early age because Latin helps students understand grammar, how it works, how it functions. I think 50% of the English vocabulary comes from Latin, draws directly on Latin, so it helps students understand English better as well as the other Romance languages. It's just a great skill. Back to the great conversation. We enter the great conversation when we read the great books, when we learn the great ideas, we read the great stories of those who have come before us, and we engage with them. The reason we read classics is because classics have been tried over time for their universal human value. They're relevant today even though they're hundreds of years old. Homer's The Odyssey, Virgil's Aeneid, and so many more. They have intrinsic value for students today. And so when we enter the great conversation, when we read the great books, we attempt to master the masters, those books that have proven themselves over time by their beauty, profundity, and shaping influence. And it helps us understand our own culture. This is our literary legacy as Westerners. Classical education highly values that. It values the tradition that has come before. It points students to the inheritance that is theirs. And so for a very short and simple definition of classical education, I would say that classical education studies the 7 liberal arts, which I've just named, and the great books. But again, it is so much more than that. So I'm going to give you kind of varying definitions of classical education, different perspectives, different ways of looking at it. One is that classical education is about the making of a man, not the training of a man to do things. Progressive contemporary education is all about teaching students specific skills that will help them fulfill specific roles in industrial democracies. Classical education is about cultivating one's soul, cultivating one's sense of self and place in history, developing wisdom and virtue. A central focus of classical education is schole, which is a Greek word for undistracted time to study the things most worthwhile. It is restful, contemplative learning. And so classical education is not about cramming arbitrary information into your head in order to pass a test, in order to get a specific job, in order to earn money. It's about just slowly learning, understanding, comprehending, developing wisdom, and thereby developing character. It seeks to help one become a better person. Dr. Christopher Perrin, who is a classical Christian educator, I just finished one of his courses on the online university that I mentioned earlier, and he defines classical Christian education as this: a traditional approach to education rooted in Western civilization and culture that blends Christian theology with the historical curriculum and pedagogy of the 7 liberal arts in order to cultivate societal leaders characterized by wisdom, virtue, and eloquence. I love this definition. I think it captures pretty much everything. It captures the fact that we're drawing on the Western tradition, that we're cultivating virtue and wisdom, that we're studying the seven liberal arts in the great books, and in this case it has a distinctly Christian focus, where we're emphasizing the Christian tradition, which is inherently part of the Western canon and the Western tradition. As classical educators, we are teaching children to love the things that are lovely. We are transmitting the soul of a society from one generation to the other. And we are cultivating the soul to know and love truth, beauty, and goodness, which we believe are objective truths, objective realities. And we are seeking to recover from educational amnesia. We are seeking to do better than the educational systems that are currently failing us in the West. Anyways, I am just beyond excited to begin my classical journey. I cannot wait to teach the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Code of Hammurabi, the Odyssey, Herodotus's Histories, Orestia, Plutarch's Lives, the Narnia series, the Theban Trilogy, the Last Days of Socrates, the Early Histories of Rome by Livy, the Aeneid, various books of the Bible, various Caesar plays, some of C.S. Lewis's nonfiction, Eusebius's Church Histories, Augustine's Confession, the Christian Creeds, the Ecclesiastical History of the English People by Bede, the Rule of St. Benedict, Beowulf, The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, The Dragon and the Raven, The Song of Roland, The History of the Kings of Britain, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, The Divine Comedy, The Canterbury Tales, The Bondage of the Will, and so forth. My reading list for the summer is going to be incredible, and I am so excited to kind of take you guys on this journey with me, to share the books that I'm reading in preparation for being a classical teacher, the books that I'll be tackling with my students this year, and just share this deep dive that I'm about to take into classical literature, into history, into philosophy, into all these great things. This is really a dream come true for me, and I can't help but share it and to tell people about classical education and to tell people about the great books and the liberal arts. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be more videos coming. currently I'm taking a course on how to read the great books that'll prepare me to teach the great books, and I hope to share some of the things I learned there. But again, I just need to reiterate that these are not my own ideas and conclusions. I'm in the learning stages. I'm drawing on the work of others. I'm parroting really great classical educators who I look up to. And so yeah, I don't want to take too much of the glory here because I am a student and I will always be a student, especially of the great books, but there's nothing that I'd rather be than that. And so thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've heard of classical education, if you have any questions about it, if you're curious to know more. And yeah, I will see you guys again soon. So many exciting videos to come. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.